and welcome to Lunch and Learn. I'm Cynthia Martin.
And I'm Patsy Shreve, and we're going to be your host today. And our topic today, what we're going to be talking about today is Real Life Revised, Our Story.
Exactly, Patsy. And as Patsy and I talked about it the last few days, and we've had a little bit of comments, we wanted to talk about why we do what we do, what is Lunch and Learn, what is Real Life Revised. And so the best way to start is always at the beginning. And so we felt it would be important for those that are in our audience, that are listening to us, that we tell our story, and that will help you to understand who we are and what we do. So I'm going to start out with my story. When I was a teenager, I was called into the ministry. And I felt that I was called to be a pastor's wife. Not because I really believe that God audibly told me that I was called to be a pastor's wife, but because I was called to ministry. But it was the only framework in which I had for a woman to be in ministry at the time. It's the only thing that I had seen modeled to me. Well, I had some issues happen in my family of origin, and I had gotten some advice from a spiritual leader. And I made a choice, and I abandoned the call of God on my life, and I followed the path of the advice that I got. So I went my own way for about 17 years, and in that time period, I became very broken. And I can go into many years of details into where I was, but I can just tell you I was a very broken individual. I was broken, I was hurt, I was angry, I was a very nasty person. And when my life began to crumble about 17 years later, 17 to 20 years, and there was a couple of years when I was floundering, trying to get myself together and trying to make the old life work. And I came to a place where I had to make a choice, and I made a choice to go for God and go for everything that He had for me in my life. And so I ended up, long story, there's a lot of things that happened in between that really add to this story, but because of the interest of you just getting the highlights, I ended up moving my family as a single woman at this point to Florida to go through ministry school because I had connected with God, and I realized through some counseling that I didn't know what to do with my life, and someone challenged me, and they said, well, what were you going to do with your life before this 17-year period? And I said, well, I was going to go to ministry school. God had called me into the ministry. And they talked to me about how God's call is irrevocable. See, I felt that I had messed up my life, that I was done, and that I could no longer serve God because I had made so many mistakes. And so this person encouraged me to go and learn. It wouldn't hurt anything to go and learn. And so I moved my three children. I have four. My oldest was already out of the house and married. And I moved my three other children, and we moved across the United States from Michigan to Florida. And I began ministry school at Brownsville Revival School of Ministry. And it was skip ahead a year or so, and God really did a mighty work in me during that time. He'd already done a lot, but He began to reshape my focus. And as I began to cry out to God and cry out for Him that He would use me, if he could use any part of my life, that I was willing and open, He began to speak to me about that He had called me, and that my call was to set captives free, which had really just kind of opened up my eyes, because in that 17 years, what women could do or what was accepted in ministry was so totally different than what it was 17 years prior. So I began to see that I was called to do some things for God, but I wasn't called to be a pastor's wife. I was called to set captives free. Well, during that time, I remember standing in the Orange. For those of you who are familiar with Brownsville Revival School of Ministry, we had orange carpet, and we had two large classrooms that we met in. One had blue carpet and one had orange carpet. So we began to affectionately call the different classes orange in the orange or in the blue. And I was in the orange, and I remember worshiping, probably was during chapel, and God spoke to me and He said, "You're here." And I began to ask Him, what are you talking about? And immediately I remembered that as I was growing up, my grandmother prayed for me. Now, grandmothers, your prayers have power. Right. And I began to really kind of do a double take. And I remember as I was growing up as a little girl and all the way through high school, my grandmother had now been gone probably 20 years at this point. But I remember her prayers and her speaking into me that you're going to go to Bible school. You're going to do the things that God has called you to do. You're going to teach the word. You're going to minister to people. And she spoke that over me, and she prayed that over me. And I always knew that she was praying that over me. And she was determined that I was going to go to Liberty Bible College. That was her frame of what you did when you wanted to go to ministry school. And so here I was in the Orange. And for those of you who don't know, is the campus that Brownsville Revival School of Ministry was in the campus of Liberty Bible College. Now, it was a different Liberty Bible College than my grandmother knew, but it was Liberty Bible College. And so as I began to stand there with my arms raised and worshiping the Lord, he began to speak to me that I was finally on track. So I had taken a deviation for 17 to 20 years of his plan for my life. But God is faithful. He will bring you back to his plan. So as I began to weep, he began to speak to me about, yes, my call. I was called, because I'm telling you that you are called. Everyone is called. And that I had gifts to give, and that he was calling me to set captives free. Well, I began at that time to pursue the ministry of deliverance. Isn't that what set captives free is? Because again, it was in my frame of mind. And so I began to do that. But God, over the years, the couple of years that I worked very heavily in that deliverance, he began to show me, and he spoke to me very clearly, Cynthia, people are captive to many things. And so he began to show me that my view was, okay, God, I got it. I'm going to learn how to I'm going to get myself healed while I'm here. I'm going to connect with you in a deeper way. And I'm going to take my little toolbox of things that you're teaching me, and I'm going to go back to Michigan. I'm going to set myself up as a little deliverance minister at a church somewhere and work backroom ministry, helping to set captives free in deliverance. And God began to show me that there's more to it, because I was looking at it from my own frame of mind. So he began to show me that people are captive to many things. People are captive to their own pain. People are captive to the way they're thinking. People are captive to cycles. And those may be demonically influenced, but they're not always demons that are involved. Sometimes it's pain. Sometimes it's mind shift. Their mind has not been transformed. Sometimes it's forgiveness issues. Sometimes it's their belief in who God is, and their belief in who he is and who he's not. Their ability to receive and give out love, their ability to be vulnerable. And so God began to speak with me, and he brought other people into my life that I began to collect other tools that I could put into my toolbox. And one of the things that I did along this time is I ran into Patsy and Jim Shreve, who were actually neighbors across from me, well, when we were in ministry school, but we really never got connected. I wonder, Patsy, if that wasn't God's setup in the first place and we missed it. You know, we were so wrapped up in Brownsville and revival that in school that we totally missed it. Yeah. But we began to work together through other teams, and we became very close, and we began to realize that some of the callings that we had on our lives were very connected in what we do. And so through all of this, through the many years, we have worked independently, and we've worked many times together. We find ourselves in teams. Even when we're working with someone else, we reconnect with each other, and we've traveled together. We've moved across the country and worked in ministries together, and God just always seems to bring us back together. And so I want to kind of stop now and let Patsy tell her story, but I do want to say that I believe, I'm going to speak prophetically right now, I believe that God is calling people to work together in teams, because I believe that my strengths are what Patsy needs, and her strengths are what I need. I'm stopping the focus on my weakness, because I don't want to waste my time worried about the areas that I can't see. I'm going to allow Patsy to be that person to see the places that I can't see, and she vice versa. So I'm speaking to those of you out there that have never been able to find your place. You know, God may use you individually, but I believe it's a time when we need to work together. And that's where we have come, the beginnings of what we're doing now. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we pause and Patsy tell her story.
So I think with both of us, we discovered our calling, or what we knew we were supposed to be doing, through deliverance.
Mhm.
I know with mine, I mean, I could give you a lot of background on, accepting the Lord when I was 12 and then doing my own thing and then going to different meetings and having different people minister to me, coming back to the Lord and the whole testimony. And then living as a Christian and living fine and doing a lot of things and awesome things. I worked in prison ministry for a long time, but I knew I was called, but I wasn't quite sure what it was that I was called to. I was always, well, yeah, this is great. I'm doing this, and I love this, and I'm a teacher, and I like this, working in private schools, and so and I knew it for that season. That's what I was called to, and I know that the Lord works in seasons in our life, and so for that season, that's what I was called to do. But I knew that there was always something more that He had placed in my heart. I had had prophetic words also spoken over me about I was called to healing and to being a healer. And I didn't know how in the world that would work because I'm thinking mainly just like a physical, healing, maybe laying hands on the sick and they will recover, and that's where my mindset was. It was very narrow, like Cynthia said, very narrow in what I assumed healing meant. And so ended up going to Brownsville to the revival there, and God just got a hold of my heart and just transformed it. I mean, it just turned me inside out. And I remember just sitting there laughing and crying all at the same time, tears just pouring and pouring and pouring out of my eyes. But then I'm laughing at the same time. I'm thinking, Lord, what is going on? I mean, you kind of wonder if you're going nuts or what's going on with all of this. But it was like, wow. But it was such a healing experience emotionally for me. And I had never connected the two, or to realize that, wow, not only do we need the physical healing, but we need the emotional healing too. Well, when I got back home, then I got involved with a group that's called Fisherman Fridays, and we would go out on the Fridays and we would go out and minister to people, and we'd always pray first of all who we're supposed to be with, and then where we're supposed to go, and then the Lord would just pretty much guide us and lead us where we're supposed to go. And we'd minister in that area, whatever He brought to us. Sometimes it was to pray over the city, sometimes it was just to minister to those. Well, then we came back one evening, and one young lady that I know really, really well, who's an on fire, amazing woman of God, there were some men and women there that had done a lot of deliverance ministry. And all they said to her was, I see that it seems like you might have father issues. And I went, oh my goodness. And all of a sudden she fell out of her chair and started manifesting a demon. And I thought, whoa, what is this? This does not line up with my theology about Christians. I was thinking Christians cannot have a demon. They cannot manifest a demon. There is no way. And I know the pastor there, who happened to be a woman, she and I were both standing there watching this all take place. They just went ahead and set her free. They just spoke life into her and started setting her free. And then she came back onto her chair, and she's just going, wow, that was so amazing. I feel so much lighter. I feel so much better. And I'm still in shock, just standing there going, okay, Lord, I don't understand this. This does not make sense to me at all. And so then that's when He started speaking to me. And I know the woman pastor at the time, I looked at her and I went, so what is this all about? And she goes, I don't know, but we need to find out more about this. We need to find out. And I thought, yeah, and so that kind of was the catalyst to get me starting to search for how does this fit in with healing? And all of a sudden, the Lord just started downplaying. Once I was opened my heart to this, He started teaching me and showing me the connection between healing, whether it's emotional, physical, spiritual, and deliverance. And that was something that I had to discover because I didn't realize the connection between all of those things. And again, then he sent us to Brownsville Revival for training, because I knew I had to get training, and I did not know how that was going to happen. And I just trusted the Lord. I just said, Lord, you know what I need. You know how I need to get it. I don't know where to even start. And God just miraculously opened up doors for me to get the training, to go to the BRSM, to get training and work with teams. And again, I am a big advocate of teamwork and team players. I know, because He told me specifically, you're called to a team, and you are called to healing and deliverance. And of course, the healing part was first. and the deliverance second. Well, with Cynthia, it's the opposite. Hers is the deliverance focus and the healing also. But we mesh together so well because we can both minister to people in both capacities, and we both have our strengths and weaknesses in both of those areas, but we're both strong in both, and then we both have areas where we complement each other and fill in the blanks for each other. And I know it was just amazing to me to see the revelation of how they all connected, and I didn't realize that until I got to Brownsville and really started working with people and seeing we've had lots of experience working with hurt and wounded people and people that just are demonized. And I'm not saying that you can have, that you are demon possessed. I'm not saying if you're a Christian, you're not demon possessed, but they can have a lot of influence over you and your life. And so we started to see how to help those people in all those areas, not only setting them free from the demonic activity, but also the healing of the heart, because so much of the time, the demonic is attached to those wounds and hurts in our hearts. And we need to know how to get those wounds and hurts healed up in our hearts so that we can be totally and completely set free. And like Cynthia said, that's our whole heart, is just to see people set free, to see them doing all they can do for God, to see them develop that relationship with Him that they've never had before because of all the blockages that they've had in their life. So what we like to do is try to help them remove those blockages. We allow God, the Holy Spirit, to move through us and to use us, but because it's all Him anyway, He's the healer, He just uses us as His vessels to get that accomplished. And so it's very exciting. I know I get very passionate when I start talking about what I'm really called to do, because it was exciting to learn, wow, this is the area that God really is using me. This is where I just really get passionate. And yes, all the other things are wonderful and good, and He can use you in all these areas, but there's always that that understanding and knowing that this is where I feel I am really called to help others get free from those hurts and wounds.
Exactly, Patsy. And you told a story that I'd never heard before. I didn't know about the Fisher thing. That's really cool. As many years as we've been together, every once in a while we'll tell a story that the other one doesn't know. And that's like, wow, I've never heard that one. But I think what's really great about what both of us have said is that we came at a time when God opened our eyes to something that we'd never seen before.
Right.
Mine came out of brokenness, and Patsy's came, I had to have something. And I remember thinking, I don't even care if it's all demons. I just have to have truth, because I have to rebuild my life into something.
Right.
And, Patsy, you wasn't maybe not at that broken place, but God uses all the things that we go through, and then He kind of weaves, all the way through, and He connects the dots for us. And all through the years that we have went, God has helped us, as I like to say, pick up tools that we have used, that God is now using in a program or in a systematic way that we help people. And one of the things that both of us have seen is that we have worked in ministries that are totally focused on deliverance. Mm-hmm. And people do get free. But our position is they need so much more. And then we've also worked in situations where people get emotional inner healing, whatever you want to call it. And that is also connected to physical healing. But we specifically, God has called us to work in those areas of wounds that keep us trapped in those beliefs that we have. But then we say, but they're not totally free. And so there's so many other areas. There's 5 or 6 areas in which we believe packages or encompasses a whole or a complete or a total or a wholeness, and not using new age terms, but new age people are just people who've stolen things from God, but that we are able to put these things together and use the tools to help people be free. Mm-hmm. I've really struggled over the years is how do you express freedom to someone who's never been free? Right. And Patsy and I talked about this the other day. How do we do that? And I go back to my own experience. I remember feeling like a hood had been pulled off of my head and that I could see finally. I remember thinking, and this is kind of a cliche comment, but the world is my oyster. The options of what God would allow for me just so opened up. Mm-hmm. I remember being so at peace and so secure in who I was. And those are the words that come to me that you just can't express. It's like you turned into a whole new person, but you're still the same person, but God's going to use all of you, and that he's so in love with who you are. And one of the things, Patsy, I think that is important, and sometimes people have trouble being vulnerable.
Yes.
And, I went through some ministry, and I chose someone who was very far away, hours away, because I never wanted to see them again. So I could be truthful with who they were. And I thought, well, then I'll never have to see them again. Well, don't you know, they're now the president of an organization that I've had a lot of training through. So God has a sense of humor. But I'm in such a place now, I don't care. I can tell everybody what my wounds were. But at the time, I was so full of shame, and I was so broken. And I think that Lunch and Learn, bringing it back to what we're doing now, is that Patsy and I do ministry with people, and we help them come out of the places that they are and to remove those blinder and help them connect the dots. We deal with all of those wounds, and we don't want to go through steps, because that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for wholeness. But I'm here to tell you that God has equipped Patsy and I to do that. And so when you've been filled with the Spirit of God to the place that God has filled you up and you're used to pouring out, that I think there's scripture that talks about it's in our bones, and we have to give out somewhere. And so Lunch and Learn is one of those avenues in which we are beginning to use to help people see who God is and to help convey his heart for them and their love for them. Our I can't say our general ministry, our Lunch and Learn is like another outlet. But our main ministry, Real Life Revised, is a program in which we will help people move through the steps that they need to go through in order to become that whole person. If God has spoken to you in your past, and you know that you're not fulfilling the things that he's called you to. Maybe you don't even know that God has called you. I'm here to tell you he has called you. He has a purpose for your life. Yeah. Maybe you can't connect the dots. Well, you've done a little bit of this, and you've done a little bit of that, and you've done a little bit of this, and you don't know how it fits together. Maybe you're not like everybody else. Patsy and I have talked about this. I have struggled for many years in certain circumstances, religious circles specifically, in which women are viewed as less than. And to struggle with having the types of gifts that I have, which are very strong, and I have a very strong personality, how does that fit in? And so you begin to ask God, so God, why did you make me this way if this is not the gifting? And so God begins to show you where you're used and why you're used and what that's about.
Right. And I think too, one of the things that he had to show me is don't worry about connecting all the dots yet. They will eventually connect. A lot of times you have to just wait, because you're thinking, okay, like I said, I was teaching, and I was doing prison ministry, and I was doing all these other things. But it's quite interesting how in the end, he uses all of those experiences, all of those places you've been, all of those, even your pain and your hurts and your wounds and the different things that you've experienced, to bring glory to him, because he can utilize those when you are working and doing and flowing in your calling and moving in your calling and doing what he's called you to do. He will use those things again to help another person. And I think that's what's always awesome to see, is you can use your stories, you can use your experiences for his glory by helping someone else that's in that same situation or in that same place as you were.
And I wouldn't give up any of the pain that I walked through. No. Because of the value of what God has shown me about who he is and who I am through those painful places.
That's right.
But my hope is for anyone who's listening, is that you don't give up.
That's right.
Don't give up. Don't think that you've messed up too bad, because it's not true. That's a lie from the pit of hell.
That's right.
Don't allow spiritual wounds. Maybe you've been wounded by a spiritual leader. That has happened to me several times in my life. Mm-hmm. But I refuse to allow someone else's issue to take me out. Right. Now, did God have to deal with me about some of my own responses in those situations? Absolutely. But I refuse to lay down God's call for a wound or for someone else's issue. Don't let that happen to you. Don't let someone else steal your blessing. Don't let someone else steal your call. Maybe you haven't known how to go ahead, Patsy.
I said, I know one way that I process that is to examine, is that my issue or is that their issue? And most of the time it's their issue. It's not my issue. And so I have to remember to let that go and not to make their issues my issues. And so I have to separate the two and realize, okay, this is their issue. And so I'm not going to take that on as mine.
Exactly. But God uses those times to build things in us, because it wouldn't bother us unless it has a finger on something.
Right.
And so, if you have that wound that you can't get past, whether it's from a spiritual leader, whether it's from a spouse, maybe it's a betrayal of a friend, because we've had those as well. But God uses those to produce character in us, but he also uses us to be able to be vulnerable with other people and say, oh man, I know how painful that is. But don't allow someone else's problem to keep you from what God has for your life.
Yes.
Maybe, Patsy and I struggled so many times. Well, we thought this was it, and it failed. And we're like, what did we do? Did we miss God? But we can look back now and say, no, God, that was needed for what we needed to learn. So we just continue to be open to what God is doing. And so if you have a place in you in which you have a wound, you have a blind spot. You have this blind spot. Sometimes we don't know we have a blind spot, I will tell you. But if you find yourself in the same cycles, you can be free from that. You can be healed. You can get set on the path again. As I said, my story, I had a 17 to 20 year deviation, but God was faithful, because the callings that he put in my life, that he purposed when he created me in my mother's womb, are irrevocable. And I'm telling you, if you're listening right now, God is reaching out to you, because in this end time, he needs every person in their place working together to save humanity. Right. Now, you can't tell me the way the news is today that we don't need God, that we don't need answers of God. Mankind systems cannot heal what needs to be healed, cannot bring unity. Only God can. And every one of us need to be in our place doing our thing, whatever our thing is. And if you can't find your thing, don't give up. Keep working at it. Keep moving. Find out what's stopping you and get it in your place with your armor on, whatever that involves. Patsy, anything from there?
No, I think you've covered a lot of it. I think we're probably just about out of time. So
yeah, we got about 3 or 4 minutes, but I would like to mention, it's kind of funny, but Patsy, and I probably won't even say it right because I'm not from there. Patsy's from Oregon. Is that how you pronounce it? Oregon? I'm from Michigan, so I had that Michigan twang. And I moved from Michigan to Florida. Patsy came from Oregon to Florida. And there's been times in our lives when Patsy's been in California and I've been in Texas, and then we were both in Colorado together, and then we're back here, and she's in Alabama and I'm in Florida. We're only about 45 minutes apart right now. But God, even in that time, he had to move both of us into a place and to where we could do what we're doing today together. Now, God has used so many mentors. Patsy and I have a lot of the same mentors that have spoken into my life. One is passed on into glory, but I still hear her voice of the lessons that she's taught me, and I will honor that and continue that, what she's taught me. And I have other mentors that have spoken into my life and released me, believed in me, and released me to go and make mistakes.
Amen.
Right, Patsy? Go and make mistakes, because only in mistakes will you learn and will you be doing something. If you're going to wait until you got it all right, you won't ever do anything.
That's right.
So we're both, Patsy and I are here to tell you that God has a call on your life. You have a purpose. If you don't know what it is, if you can't connect the dots, or if you're too wounded, it's okay to be wounded. It's okay. We were there. We understand that. Maybe there's some things that God needs to deal with and you're not sure how to get on past it. It's got you stuck. That's what we're here for. We're here to help you move on in God. We're help you to become who he created you to be. In your mother's womb, he had an idea. I'm going to need this in the world, so I'm going to create you. And the world needs you. The world needs you. Are you going to become what he's called you to be?
Mhm.
Are you going to become what he's called you to be? That's our heart's cry. Whether you get that through Lunch and Learn, whether you take a course from us, whether you come and go through the whole process of Real Life Revised, because our tagline for that name is because sometimes real life needs to be revised. If your life needs a revision, if you need help, that's what we're here for. And you can find us at realliferevised.com. You can find us on this page, or you can send us an email at realliferevised@gmail.com. God bless you. We love you, and we'll talk to you real soon. See you next time on Lunch and Learn.